Hello everybody, it's Jackson Fulcher. You might be wondering, hey, what's with this setup? Like, why are you doing it like this? What is this video? For a while now, I have collected a lot of comments from a review I made for the film Midway. It came out last November, obviously, and I put out my review a little bit early because I saw an advanced screening of it through like one of the screening services that I've signed up for. So I got my review out a little bit earlier than even earlier than like sometimes when I do normal movie reviews for movies that I pay to see in theaters, and that got it to get a lot of traction, and some attention was given to it from people that really liked the movie, but to the point where it seemed like they weren't understanding what I was saying in my review, or the fact that they just couldn't really see past the bad reasoning behind their own defense of the movie. Like, they couldn't see like how wrong they were. They just kind of wanted to like jab at me just because I didn't like the movie, and they're like, well, haha, here's this comment. So for a while I've been wanting to make this video, but I kind of like put it aside, like, whatever, maybe not. But since I'm in COVID times where I don't have that much to do, and because someone commented on it like today or yesterday, reminding me of the disastrous comment section, I was like, you know what? Let's just do it, you know? Fuck it, let's just do it. The first thing I wanted to address is that I'm not going to talk about every single comment I got. Like, there's just one saying, like, I liked the movie, it was pretty good. It's like, okay, I'm not going to respond to comments like that or people agreeing with me, because it's like, I kind of just want to focus on the main thing. I'm not talking about every single comment I got. There's even one that was like like the editing and this sucks, which is like, okay, it's not really the focus of the video I want to make, but it's like, you know, even that's just like a criticism of like my videos. Like, it's a personal preference, obviously. I've noticed that even I make like close cuts sometimes when putting stuff together, so I can understand that, but that's not the point of this video that I'm trying to make. I'm really just trying to reach the people that commented, trying to defend the movie, but with kind of flawed logic in my mind. I'm really just trying to go for that. So without further ado, let's dive into some of these. Some of them are okay. Some of them are just kind of like, whatever. But there's some that really kind of like irked me as like you know, you're making this really personal about a movie, you know? So let's go over some of these. This movie is actually historically accurate. If you want to educate yourself, look up USS Enterprise Battle 360 on YouTube. Best series ever. Okay, maybe that is the best series ever. I have not seen it, so I wouldn't really know. But the thing is, I never really criticized the movie for not being historically accurate, in the sense of the events kind of lining up, you know? I never really said this didn't happen in the movie, or this didn't happen either. So there's a lot of comments that are trying to make it seem like I just didn't look up what happened. I didn't know. Like, you know, the idea that I didn't go through middle and high school with World War II being taught to me, like, almost all the time. I guess the idea that the education system is that bad for the next generation that they don't know the importance of World War II, so this guy probably doesn't like the movie because he doesn't think it's historically accurate. It's like, that clearly is not the case. Never in my review did I ever mention, like, this definitely didn't happen in real life. It's a lot of, this feels phony, this feels fake, for a movie. I talked about the movie. I know there's a lot of people that can talk about the historical accuracy. I know there's a lot of people that know the exact details of a lot of things, but that's not me, obviously. I get the gist. I know a lot of the bigger stuff. But my entire review wasn't about... my entire review isn't about that. It's about the movie and the way it's made and the way it's written. I guess you're one of those I'm always angry and I always shit on movies review guys, just like that Angry Joe idiot. This is really just more of like a complaint towards like the movies that I actually do review, because I have a bad habit these last couple years of not reviewing everything I see. So sometimes there's just a string of some videos I upload where I am negative on the movies. Not like completely negative though. Like when I uploaded the Midway one, I believe it's been a while since I gave like a complete thrashing on a movie. And even when I'm more disappointed in it, I don't think I'm getting like Angry Joe levels of angry. You know, like I feel like I discuss a lot of things I like, and then I just discuss some things that disappointed me, some things that didn't really work. But also, just to counter this, I also upload reviews where I do like movies. Literally a couple days after I did the Midway one, I reviewed Dr. Sleep, which is one of my favorite movies of last year. So yes, occasionally I do get angry and shit on movies that I don't like. But it's not, I'm always angry, and I always shit on movies. This timestamp here at 2:25, I rewatched my Midway review, by the way, so just so it's fresh in here as well, because I didn't remember that review word for word, so I did watch that before doing this. The timestamp is referring to when I mentioned that a character had kind of walked up and said, man, this is my last day before retirement, and I'm off sea duty, and this is a pretty memorable last day, you know? Like that cliche line that you hear before in other war movies or before a tragic event happens, and the comment is, pointing out that timestamp and going, pretty sure that really was that guy's last day. He was supposed to retire that month. And this guy isn't being hateful or anything, so I'm not trying to diss this man or woman who was commenting here, but I did want to point out, like, yeah, maybe in real life that guy that they brought up was someone whose last day was that day. They were about to retire. But the point I was trying to make in that movie was that in a movie that is so filled with cliched lines of dialogue, so many cheesy, poorly thought out lines, that having the very, very cliche line of, it's my last day before I retire, it's just something that stands out even more, because that's like the famous cliche line, you know what I mean? And if it really was that guy's last day before retirement, then obviously that's tragic. Every death involved with World War II is obviously tragic, but I would have cut that line out completely and tried to get us involved with these characters through their interactions with each other, you know, getting you to know them on a more personal level than just, well, have them state what's going on in their lives and then we just kind of move on, which is what I addressed in my Midway review, is that it doesn't really feel like you're in the moment with a lot of these people. It feels like you're going through air, that you acknowledge it's there, but you're just kind of passing through it, and you're not really affected by any of the drama or anything that's going on. And that's really what I'm trying to get at. Not that this is historically inaccurate, and then you're saying, actually, that was that guy's last day before retirement. It's like, no, I completely acknowledge that maybe it was, but that's not the point I was trying to make. I was just trying to say that in a movie filled with cliche lines, that's one that you especially could have taken out or reworked to get to make us care more about the characters, which is my overall complaint with a lot of stuff in the movie, is that a lot of the character work falls really flat and they all feel very cookie cutter, like basic traits, not real characters, just character traits, the bare minimum of them. Seen it twice, great movie, ignore the critics. This guy isn't really like attacking me directly. I mean, I know some people might say, well, you're a critic. I don't take myself that seriously. Like, I'm just a guy who makes videos about movies I see and I just give my 2 cents on what I think. I don't really think of myself as like a amazing critic. I am literally just a guy who talks about stuff that he likes and dislikes. So I don't really consider this like a personal attack against me. Maybe he totally meant to, but I'm not too angry about this comment, but it is just very stereotypical for if you disagree with a common opinion that is going around. And even then, my opinion wasn't that common. I feel like a lot of people were just saying like, this is just kind of generic, where me, I was like, I fucking hate this movie. But this guy's going like, seen it twice, great movie, ignore the critics. Just ignore everyone who might have a different opinion because they disagree with me and I loved it. So ignore them. Ignore any other conversation to be had with anyone, even though it could lead to a more interesting insight, or maybe I could realize something by talking to them that I didn't think of. Nah, just ignore the critics. That's something I just always have a problem with when someone just says, ignore the critics. It's like, I really like film discussion and film criticism because of the conversations that can come from talking about movies with each other, because really that's a lot of the fun of it. And this guy is just saying, nah, just don't open any kind of critical thinking or any kind of conversation with anyone. Just see it and love it like I did. Also, I just wanted to point out that his profile picture is a cowboy in front of an American flag, and that is so stereotypical of your average boomer. And boomer is kind of a bad word as far as like the senior citizens go. Like, everyone likes to say, oh, these boomers around the world, and obviously respect your elders. They've gone through a long life experience that we will never understand, so it's interesting to gain their insight. But at the same time, there are a lot of elderly people. Let's not be mistaken here. There are a lot of elderly people that see their experiences compared to the new generation and go, you guys didn't have it tougher than us, so we're gonna look down on you. You guys don't know anything because you're young. I am older, thus making me wiser, when maybe that's not entirely true. You know, it's all about communication here in the world, folks. But for those kind of people, those senior citizens that like to look down on people and talk bad about the next generation, the young generation, those people deserve to be called boomers. Let's not kid ourselves here. Those people definitely deserve to be called boomers. This next comment isn't really like a slight against me, but it is a perspective that I did want to at least address for this. The guy starts off, interesting. You say that what you like about war movies is that you get invested with the characters, like in Dunkirk. I am blown away by people who actually found Dunkirk to be any good. It just follows a few inconsequential stories that have no bearing whatsoever on the big scheme of things, which I completely disagree with. But this last part of his paragraph, it's really just like he sees it differently and I see it differently, so I don't really want to talk about it that much. But his second paragraph goes, its biggest asset is its historical accuracy, including the part that I criticize when that dude jumps into the plane and guns down an incoming suicide bomber. I feel like he's talking about when I mentioned that Nick Jonas has a randomly inserted moment where he jumps into a gunner and like shoots down an incoming plane that's gonna suicide bomb them. And just so you guys know, I wasn't really criticizing that scene because Nick Jonas's character did that. I was just criticizing the overall treatment of his character, where I felt like they utilized him awkwardly. They just had him kind of randomly show up a couple times, because at one point he dies near the end of the film, but you gotta show him there beforehand, you gotta build him up, but I didn't think they built him up properly. It just felt like, well, he's necessary here, so drop him in, alright, take him out, drop him in here because he did this thing in real life, take him out, drop him in here, and that's it. I just found it, like, clunky, the structure of his character. So once again, this comment wasn't being, like, directly hurtful or aggressive against me or anything like that. It was just a different perspective that I thought would be interesting for some of you, but one that I could also counter in a way that was calm and reasonable. This thread right here, oh my god, that's what and how people talk during the 40s. You expect for them to talk like young people like today, all politically correct, unsure, safe, etc.? Agreed. Does this guy think people have always talked like people do today? Plus he doesn't know much about airplanes from his comments. This guy is just a hack. Yeah, you're right. I'd like to point out that this guy believes that I'm criticizing the dialogue in the movie because that's not how people talk in the 40s, and he's saying, how would you know because you weren't born then? You know, that whole argument of you weren't there, so how do you know any better? And that's not what my argument was about the dialogue. My thing about the dialogue was that everything about it felt phony and hokey. It felt cliche and cheesy. You listen to these people talk and it feels just wrong. There's something off about them. There are other movies that go back into the past and recapture the era perfectly, so it's not a problem of, I don't think people talk like this in the 40s. I want them to be politically correct, which I never mentioned in my review. Not once did I say the dialogue should have been more politically correct. Like, I don't know where you got that from. My problem was that it all felt cheesy. Like, you can write a movie taking place today. If it had the same kind of level of dialogue, I would still say the same thing. It's cheesy, it's phony. That was my problem with Midway's dialogue, is that everything felt stupid from a man who has famously made and written stupid movies. That's what kind of gets me about all these too, before I move any further, is that a lot of people came out of the woodwork to comment and defend this movie, made by a guy who has famously made poorly put together movies, which is really what I'm criticizing this movie for. But these people, like, they just take it very personally, that you just don't understand the importance of World War II, you don't know anything about the past, and it's like, I clearly was not talking about that. I talked about the movie as a movie. I unfortunately forgot to record this part, so I apologize that the audio quality sounds a little weird for this, because I switched to my phone one. Sorry, very last minute, I know. But this last one where this guy is like, this guy doesn't know anything about airplanes, he's obviously referring to the part where I criticized the staging of when the one person at Pearl Harbor actually noticed the planes incoming when it was too late, you know? Like, I was criticizing how Roland Emmerich structured the scene of one man on a boat looking out to the sea, the horizon. Once he finally turns around, he sees the planes when it's already too late. Where realistically, it feels like at least more than this one guy would have seen them before they got too close. And there's even a point later on in the film where they're looking for a plane in the sky and they're like, oh, I don't know where it is. And they look away for a moment. They look back. The plane is so close that it's like, how did you not see it from earlier? You know, that's when I'm criticizing Emmerich's structuring and his filmmaking. And this guy's trying to say, I don't know anything about airplanes just because of that. Like, okay, sure. Like, yeah, I live in a place where there are a lot of jets and planes go by. And they come up pretty quickly, like, to the point where, like, oh, I didn't expect that. But still, my criticism, I think, is still valid, because the way these scenes are structured, you would notice some of the planes sooner than how they reveal them in the movie. Once again, it's a slight against the filmmaking, not planes don't do that. Like, oh my god, it's so stupid. Before I read this guy's comment, I would like to point out that his channel banner is this. And I feel like that's important before I talk about what he wrote down. Let's read it. How do you know how the real people were if you weren't there? See, that's exactly what I said in the last one. You weren't there, so how do you know? If you spend all your time watching movies, maybe that's your problem with watching movies. This wasn't about Pearl Harbor. It wasn't about the Doolittle raids on Tokyo. It wasn't about the Battle of the Coral Sea. All those were relevant events that led up to the Battle of Midway, that in some way were affected the decisions that shaped the outcome. Wait, that's a spelling error. That in some way were affected the decisions. I think he meant to say affecting. That in some way were affecting the decisions that shaped the outcome. Yeah, he misspelled it there, but I think that might be his only one. At least I hope so. I don't really understand his, like, going off of, like, this wasn't about Pearl Harbor, this wasn't about Doolittle raids on Tokyo. It's like, I never really said that, you know? I never said, this is about Pearl Harbor. I did mention that it felt like a lot of things were just kind of glossed over, and that a lot of things were just happening and it didn't feel like you were invested in the situations. I never said, they should have focused more on this because the movie is clearly about this. I mean, it kind of is, though, because as you say, these are relevant events that led up to the Battle of Midway. They are relevant, so maybe don't gloss over them in a way that feels too quick and that you feel like you don't live in the moment with the characters. Honestly, I give your review an F. Oh my. Oh my, that don't you love that when you see a review and then in a comment section someone goes, they take the grade and they go, well, I give your review an F, like acting like they're the most clever person in the world. Ugh. There's already like a stigma for like a lot of film critics where like they're sad losers who have nothing better to do than talk about a movie and they should just make their own stuff, but they can't. They're just sad, pathetic people. And obviously that's not completely true, but imagine how sad it is to give a grade to a movie review. You know what I'm saying? Like imagine like reviewing someone's review and giving it a grade like an F. Imagine the critic from Ratatouille, but he reviews other food reviews, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, how sad and pathetic is that? And it's also just a really bad joke. Like, come on, my guy, come on. Dick Best and Wade McCluskey were very important people whose actions and portrayed as characters in the movie were shaped around, but if you knew half as much about the story, but wait, he messed up again. Because the first part of the sentence is, Dick Best and Wade McCluskey were very important people whose actions, and then he puts a comma, and he does like that thing where like you put in something before you finish the sentence, like, and portrayed as characters in the movie were shaped around. So when he ends that comma after that part, it's supposed to finish that first sentence, where he's setting up these very important people whose actions, but we don't know the rest of it because he just goes off on, if I knew half as much about the story behind the movie as I act like, you know about how movies are put together, you know who they were. It's just like, maybe he has a point buried in there somewhere, but now I'm confused at what he's trying to get at because he can't spell correctly. I have no idea what this last sentence is supposed to convey to me. The thing he's trying to get at in this last part of a jumbled sentence is that if I had researched the story myself beforehand, the specific details of the story instead of like the gist, like essentially what I got in school, then I would remember who they were because I made a point to mention in my review that I didn't remember anyone's names by the time the credits rolled. Which, yeah, I could have. That's optional, though. Because when you're watching a movie, that should be able to tell the story in a way that you get connected to and that you remember. You know, it's like, sure, I could have looked up the actual story and all these characters before seeing the movie, but still that doesn't excuse the movie for doing the bare minimum of what a movie is supposed to do. It's exactly the argument of, you should have read the book before you saw the movie based off the book, because then you'd appreciate it more. It's like, sure, I could have, that's optional, but when you're watching a movie that is adapting the book, it is the movie's job to give that same feeling that the book gave people. You're not supposed to read a book and then see the movie like poorly bring it to the big screen and just go, well, I'm glad I read the book because I understand these characters, because if I just saw the movie I wouldn't have. Like, that's just a bad job on the movie's part. Once again, I am talking about the movie. I'm not criticizing history, okay? I am talking about the movie. The movie's portrayal of these famous events. That's it. But everyone's acting like you're not a World War II buff, so of course you didn't like this movie. You can't appreciate it like the rest of us. And it's like, okay, sure, maybe, but at the same time, I'm also a film fan who likes to see movies. And I even like movies based on true stories when they appropriately recreate the people as characters in the film. And you understand them, you see their journeys. I even mentioned that in the review. Like First Man, I always like to mention First Man because that's one that's not jingoistic, it's not hokey or phony or like overly cheesy. It's a movie that gives you a deep dive into understanding the character that is Neil Armstrong in the film. Midway doesn't do anything like that. Sure, you can look up facts about Neil Armstrong before you see First Man, but when you watch First Man by itself, if you didn't know anything about Neil Armstrong beforehand, you feel like you know him by the time the movie ends. That is not the case with any character in Midway. Once again, I'm talking about filmmaking and writing, I'm not criticizing it. The idea that I'm criticizing history is bonkers. I don't think you and your generation knows what a patriotic movie is supposed to be. Boomer. You probably think the Americans should have been the bad guys. Go watch some old World War II movies prior to 1980. Better yet, visit the World War II Museum and you'll have a better appreciation for the movie. Once again, the idea that if I become a World War II history buff, that I'll appreciate the movie more. That'll fix all of the movie's problems when it comes to filmmaking and writing. Ugh. He says me and my generation, so this guy is probably like, over 70, that we don't know what a patriotic movie is supposed to be. You probably think the Americans should have been the bad guys, which I never said. I never said the Americans should have been the bad guys. I did mention that the Japanese in the movie were treated as just the bland, stereotypical, just, I'm evil, instead of treated like actual people, which they were. There are a lot of them that were just following orders from their government. Like a lot of generals too, they're probably just listening to their government, they had to give orders to their soldiers, you know? But like I said in the review, instead of going in a more interesting direction and analyzing that aspect of it, they went with a more cartoonish, dated approach of treating them like a big supervillain organization, like the Empire. Which is something that works for a propaganda film, like in those old World War II propaganda films where they're trying to get people to be inspired about the war, to go join the fight, because that's the job of propaganda, to get you stirred up and wanting to fight the bad guys. For a propaganda, sure, that works, but when you're watching a movie, especially one that was made in 2019. You can't just go back to the past and be like, well, this is just supposed to be a fun, patriotic movie. It's not something of me and my generation doesn't know what a patriotic movie is supposed to be. It's just, we want something more interesting. We don't want something that feels so cheesily pro-America. Like, yeah, America's fucking awesome. We're the best country in the world. It's like, sure, there's a lot of movies that I like that kind of have that same approach to it. Like, yeah, yay us America. But even then, they don't suffer a lot of the same dated issues in structure and storytelling that Midway suffers from. Midway feels like a dated movie. This is the kind of review you get from someone who is a total moron when it comes to the actual cultural and historical events of World War II. The same argument has been traced through several comments now. Amazing. He wants to see actors playing real historical characters pander to what he thinks a war movie is supposed to be. I never really said that. I just said that the characters didn't have anything to them. It felt like brief Wikipedia synopses were characters, and they didn't do much with it. They didn't do anything interesting with it, thus affecting the performances because the actors don't have anything to work with. I don't really recall in my review me explicitly stating like the characters should have been treated like this. I think I literally just said there should be more to it. If anything, it feels like the characters were treated in a too safe approach, like, well, if we don't know anything about it from Wikipedia, then we shouldn't include it in this, and that makes the characters feel bare bones as a result. I never explicitly said they should have acted this way, they should have done this, they should have done this and this with this character, so the idea that I wanted them to pander to me with what I wanted isn't really the case. I mean, obviously I wanted a better movie, but there's definitely different approaches that you can take to make a better movie that doesn't exactly align with how I would have made it if I was put in charge. Because obviously, you can see yourself like, well, if I made this, I would have done this, but there's other people that have different ideas that might be better than yours or one that you enjoy more. So I didn't go about making my Midway review going like, well, if I made it, I would have done this. I just pointed out, hey, I had a problem with a lot of the way this movie was made. I didn't really give suggestions of, you should have done this, like Captain Hindsight. He says it himself when he actually tries to compare a fairly accurate historical movie about a real World War II event to an over-the-top sci-fi movie like Independence Day. How moronic is that? This is what you get from someone who evidently gets all of his knowledge from movies and has never probably cracked a history book. What a dunce. Now, to be fair, yes, I did bring up Independence Day in the review because I was making a point to say that this movie's filmmaking when it comes to the action sequences were lame. Roland Emmerich, though he's historically made a lot of cheesy bad movies, there are moments in those movies where a lot of people can go, well, that was a well put together scene for just like pure like action fun. And it just so happens that one of those movies that I mentioned as an example for having well-made action scenes in it was Independence Day. I even brought up Resurgence, and even like The Day After Tomorrow, there's a couple scenes that were well put together in that. And I didn't think the filmmaking for the action moments in Midway were up to the same caliber as his prior films. That just so happened to be mostly stupid over-the-top sci-fi films. I brought up Independence Day's filmmaking for action, not Midway should have been made exactly like Independence Day. He took one piece of what I said, which was comparing the action sequences in Midway to those that are much better made in like Independence Day, which is a prior film that Roland Emmerich made. And he took that one piece that I said and tried to say that I was comparing the entirety of the movie to Independence Day. And tried to say, like, how moronic is that he's trying to say that? Like, the biggest thing that concerns me about a lot of these comments is the lack of critical thinking and just the jumping ahead to their own conclusions just based off of what they want to think. I don't think any of these people actually want to comprehend what I'm trying to say from my perspective of just watching a movie. They just want to hear exactly their thoughts just word vomited back to them. But because I didn't do that, because I offered a different perspective, they're now trying to say all these different things about me, like, oh, you just don't know anything about World War II. You need to look up other stuff. You just don't know what a patriotic movie's supposed to be. You tried to compare the whole thing to Independence Day! In his first sentence, he says, this is the kind of review you get from a total moron. And I'm not going to say that this is the kind of comment you get from a total moron, but I am going to say that this is the kind of comment you get from someone who lacks critical thinking and can't comprehend what other people say because they disagree with them. And finally, the last comment that I have here, maybe watch Toy Story or Lion King. Get your cheesy emotional fix there. This is a man's movie. Which, yes, the Toy Story films and the first Lion King are some of my favorite movies of all time, and they are very emotional, and I do gravitate towards that. But, you know, if Midway is the perfect example of what a man's movie is, then I feel bad for every man who likes Midway, because they have shit taste. I'm just kidding, obviously, but the idea that I'm just a guy who likes, as he puts it, cheesy emotional stuff and can't appreciate a man's movie, it's just such an expected comment, you know? It's just something you'd expect to get. But that being said, I can also like movies that are solely about, like, action and don't have any emotional stuff at all, like stuff that's just dedicated to action. I can enjoy movies like that, a movie surrounding like a thrilling scenario stretched out to a movie. I can enjoy movies that don't necessarily have any emotional ties to it. I do appreciate movies, though, that try to go a step beyond what they're just kind of expected to be. I appreciate movies more that try to be something more than what they kind of are to begin with. But at the same time, I can still enjoy a mindless action movie if it's well put together and fairly tight, and a well-made film from a filmmaking perspective and from like a writing perspective. But Midway isn't that. Also, before I end off, like the idea that Midway, a movie about a tragic event, real life event with a lot of sorrow and a lot of death from the American side, is a man's movie just because there's action in it. There's action in it, so it's a man's movie, instead of just looking at the overall story and going like, yeah, this was kind of a depressing time. That also feels really... That's weird thinking to me. You know, just any movie with action, that's a man's movie. I don't understand that. I'll never understand it. Oh well. So those are all the comments that I got. There's probably going to be more, like, later on that I just didn't get, but hopefully those people that comment on them after I upload this video find this video, and maybe they'll change their mind and delete their comment. Or maybe they won't, and they'll just respond to it here going like, you're totally wrong, like, okay, whatever, that's expected. But hopefully you guys got something out of this. Maybe if you thought some of this way before, maybe you changed your mind or just have a new perspective on things. I just thought it would have been an interesting video to make, because I got a lot of those repeating comments that just seemed like they didn't comprehend exactly what I was saying, so I just wanted to counter them in a way that made sense. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time. Hopefully I don't get another disastrous comment section like the one I got from Midway. But one can only dream.